Hello, students. Welcome back to my channel. Let's learn together. I hope all of you are in really good health and all of you are extremely positive about yourself. And let me very quickly begin with today's content. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss with you all the theory of feminism. Now, feminism as a word you would have come across it many times, I'm sure, because this word is very common and very readily used by many people. And you would, to a certain extent, I hope, will have an idea about what feminism is. Uh, but what I intend to do in this particular video is this, that I would try to trace a history of Western modern feminist thought from wherever we can trace it. Actually, there is a point in history. When we talk about Western modern feminist theory, there is a point in history from where we are going to trace it, and we're going to come down to as far as possible. That's one thing. Second important thing is that you need to understand why is it that I'm talking to you about feminism today. Well, the reasons are extremely simple. First of all, being class 12 student, you have a text in your syllabus which is very directly linked with feminism, and therefore you need to understand what feminism basically is, so that it will be easier for you to put your text within this broader context and then make sense of it. Second important thing, which I feel is more important thing, is that you need to know about feminism, because you need to understand and make more sense of your own life as human beings, as growing human beings. That too, you need to know what are the points, what are the basic grounds upon which our lives are basically designed upon, and how do they affect our life. They not only affect our life, these ideas, these social notions, they very severely define our lives also. So it is important for you to get in touch more get in touch more with the kind of social norms and social notions which at a very subtle level, but at a very strong level, influence our lives, right? So the word feminism basically means those theories or idea which work in favor of females, and hence the word feminism. What does it mean to be a female? What does it mean to be a woman? Or what does it mean to be a woman in a human society? Right, obviously a woman would exist in a human society, but how is it that being women, the whole idea of being women, get designed by society? Right. So this is it is needless for me to tell you that women have always occupied a subordinate and a secondary position in human society right from the beginning of the mankind. Okay, right from the time when human had decided, or with the human had formed themselves in societies and started living as a form of organization. Women had always occupied in most of the societies. Women had occupied a secondary position than men. But I'm telling once again to you, in most of the societies, and it in all societies, you would be more than happy to know that our own Keralite society, the old traditional Malayalam society, it has been matriarchal in nature. It was never patriarchal in nature, which means that it was the men who would get married and go to a women's house, and children were known by the surname of their mothers and not by their fathers. So women had always had upper hand over there. So there have been, and I'm sure this is just one example that I know because this belongs to my own country, but there would be societies, and in fact ancient societies, where women had their far superior role than men. But as much as the modern world is concerned, and as much as the Western world is concerned, it is always the patriarchy which has ruled over the human societies, right? So we are not talking about right now those societies which have been matriarchal in nature, but we're talking about those societies which are patriarchal in nature, and they are 99% in nature. 99% of the world has been occupied, or it has been dominated by patriarchy. What is patriarchy? Patriarchy is the rule of father, or the rule of men. As we all know that it's in a general society, we all know that the men gives his surname to the children, and the women would get married and go move to the house of the men, and thereby she loses all her maiden identity, and she is now known, after getting married, she is now known by the identity of her husband and the family members of the husband, right? and therefore she becomes legally the member of her new family, and by and large, uh, loses touch with her maiden family. Although we have legal rights over which the daughters of the family can claim their own legal properties, but then largely she is known by the name of her in-laws family. Now, when we go back to feminism, actually, feminism, as I told you, is a school of thought that has basically came into being as soon as or as old as the mankind had begun itself. But at the same time, it was also a thought which actually propagated the idea that women should have or should enjoy the equal status with that of men. And when I'm talking about Western modern feminism, then basically it begins from late 18th and early 19th century. Understand that this is not where the feminism begins, it is just the Western modern feminism. And in literature, we have decided to take up this particular point as a beginning of a very organized form of feminism, because if you go back to 15th and 16th century when Shakespeare was writing, and there was definitely a very clear indication of feminism in Shakespeare's play also, who was a man and talked very vociferously about women's right in his plays. Okay, but now that we are talking about organized form of an institutionalized form of thought of feminism, we are picking up this point late 18th century or early 19th century as the beginning of feminism. So in 1798, there was this female or a lady intellectual, Mary Wollstonecraft, who came up with her book, A Vindication of Right of Women, where she argued how women were pushed into the background because she did not have the same kind of political rights as that of the men in the societies. So she felt that since women did not have any role in political participation, therefore women were basically, they were suffering through this unkind treatment in the society, and they were not equal, they were unequal. Therefore they talked about how women should also be enfranchised, they should also get a right to vote while choosing the government of a country. Similarly, in the year 1869, John Stuart Mill, another writer, John Stuart Mill, in his book called The Subjection of Women, which was written in 1869, argued the same kind of argument, and he said that women should be given, they should be entitled to get the political, equality as that of men. And therefore, that was the time when this need for enfranchisement of the women, it kept on increasing, and the demand got extremely ferocious before the government, and some of the Western nations, not all, but some of the Western nations actually granted the enfranchisement to women also, and therefore women could actually now vote alongside of men of the society, right? So there was this kind of little political equality which was achieved. The reason why we are picking up this particular point as to study the role of the role of uh, feminism is that because this was the time when these demands that were being put in theory, that was actually was materialized with the changes of the rule, because now the rules were changing and the government was listening to these people, and the people were understanding, the government people or those who are in authorities, they had started to understand the justification of the arguments given by the feminists. So before that, we had been seeing the tinge of feminism here and there, but a real and the substantial changes started taking place at this time only, right? So as I told you that enfranchisement was granted to women in some of the Western nations, but the inequality in the society still pervaded, it still existed. Now since the society was still going through, or it was still treating its women member as unequal, there alongside came up a different kind of feminism, because at this time there was another set of people who were thinking that political equality alone was not necessary. Along with it, what was also required was the economic equality. Now, this is known as Marxist feminism. Marxist feminism, as the name itself is suggesting, that Marxist feminism was based upon the basic idea that had been given to the world by Karl Marx and his companion Friedrich Engels. Karl Marx had was completely convinced with the fact that uh, the inequality in the society exists because power lies with those and with only chosen few people who control the means of economic production. And therefore, he felt that uh, if we needed to fill in this gap that exists between haves and have nots, rich and the poor, then the means of economic production should be going into the hands of government of a country and not only within the we should stay within the hands of certain individuals of a society. Now, feminist ideas of Marxism was basically springing upon from these particular basic ideas itself, wherein this socialist or this Marxist feminist was saying that since men control all the means of economic production, women face inequality because they do not have the financial security and they do not have the financial superiority over men. Therefore, they came up with the idea that women should be given an equal participation in economic means of production also. Okay, as these ideas were coming up, somewhere in 1970s, there came another kind of feminism which was known as radical feminism. Radical feminism was altogether of a different kind, and here you can find different types of feminism, different types of ideas that these radical feminists were offering. These ideas were completely contrary to each other, but then that is what something that makes this whole study of feminism more interesting, because you know that feminism as an idea or as a movement has not had a very coherent kind of a development. There are contradictions here and there, and there are oppositions between these feminists whose basic idea was same to attain equality for women, but then the way they approached were completely contrary to each other, and sometimes they did not agree with each other. For instance, in radical feminism, Simone de Beauvoir. Now, Simone de Beauvoir was a French writer who, in 1970s, somewhere in 1970s or in 1988, to be more precise, in 1988, came up with a book called The Second Sex. And in this particular book, she had written one very wonderful sentence and offered a very wonderful idea. And I would like to repeat that sentence over here. I quote: "One is not born, but rather becomes woman," unquote. Okay, now this was interesting, and it took the whole world of feminism by storm. The reason was she was very essentially pointing out about how being women, or the essence of being women, is not something which is natural, was not something which is biological, because so far we have been thinking that women are women because of certain biological factors that appear with her right from her birth. But Simone de Beauvoir told us that no, it is not the case. Actually, there is nothing natural or logical about being a woman, but it basically depends upon how women are basically created in society. They are made, they are constructed, right? And therefore, I would like to just stop here a bit and talk to you about the difference between sex and gender, right? Sex and gender are different in many ways, and the basic difference is this, that the sex refers to your biological sex. Okay, now it means that a human species is born. When a human being is born, you can look at the body and decide whether this particular being is a boy or a girl. Now, that is because the human anatomical differences are there, which are definitely biological and natural. Definitely. Now, these anatomical differences, to a certain extent, guarantee the different roles that the human bodies, the two different human bodies, of that of a girl and of that of a boy, are going to perform in future. The roles that they're going to perform and the responsibility the body is going to have. For example, a girl's body would be definitely different from a boy's body in a way that, first of all, there are going to be anatomical changes. There are going to be differences which are biological. The girl's body at a later stage might be utilized for reproduction, whereas a boy's body can never be utilized for reproduction as far as natural ways are concerned, right? That is sexual difference between the two. But gender is a constructed category. It is something which is not at all not at all natural. By the way, that in a way that you know, for example, if women think in a certain way, uh, you might find women as very soft, emotional, caretakers, nurturers, uh, would like to give more importance to the relationships than to other things. Whereas when you think of the men, what comes to your mind is autonomy, authorizations, strictness, discipline. Now, these are generally the things which are associated with men. So why now this difference come because of the different kind of the upbringing patterns which are provided to a boy and a girl right from the beginning of the life. For example, if there is a little girl who is playing outside, and while playing outside she has got hurt herself, she gets herself hurt, what would the mother's responsible response at this would be? The mother would definitely take the baby, the girl baby, to her, and she would say, see, I asked you not to go out and play, why did you do it? So now go back and sit inside and play with your dolls, because that is safer and you will not hurt yourself. But imagine the same scenario with a little boy. Now the boy is also playing outside along with the friends and he also gets himself hurt. What would the mother say? Stop crying. Are you a girl? Don't cry like a girl. Move out and play. Okay? You must be ready for these kind of injuries if you're playing outside. Therefore, you can see that how a girl has been inhibited from exploring the possibilities of an outside world and has been just inserted within the interior of the house, because that is how she has to actually handle her life when she's going to grow up. She has to become a wife, she has to become a mother, and she will be mainly responsible for staying inside or indoors, whereas a boy has to move outside, has to explore the outside world. At the same time, he has to be very competitive, because in the later stage of life he has to become a potential provider for his family. And he's going to grow up as a man, he needs to become a potential provider for his family, and for him he needs to know how to compete in a difficult situation. So these are just one example. Girls are always given dolls, but boys are given weapons to play right from the time when they are babies. Why? Because playing with a girl, playing with a doll for a girl actually becomes a symbol of how she is going to take care of a baby when she's going to grow up and going to turn herself into a mother, right? Whereas once again, playing with a weapon refers to a competitive nature that one should nurture. Okay, now this is how indirectly and subconsciously, or rather unconsciously, girls and boys are differently brought up. And that is why you become a woman, because you are made a woman. Now there are different and numbers of example that one can gain about how there have been girls of extremely competitive nature and who have you know been successful uh, to a very large extent. Kalpana Chawla is one example, and there are definitely many examples that I can give you right now. Indira Gandhi, you know Benazir Bhutto, Margaret Thatcher, you know about the right now the current leader of New Zealand. And I have talked to you about Kalpana Chawla. There are a variety of women, and these women, do you think that they are not of competitive nature or they do not have autonomy in them? They have, but then they have been able to discover their potential in at some time of their life or not. But the most of the women are not allowed to discover their potential because of the kind of upbringing that has been given to them, and that is why it takes me back to Simone de Beauvoir's statement when she says that one is never born a woman but is made a woman, right? So that is how gender works actually. The difference between sex and gender is sex is biological, whereas gender is highly cultural. These are the cultural values which are put inside a woman or a girl right from the beginning of the life. So cooking is something that she has to learn. Cleaning the house is something that she has to learn. Taking care of large number of guests is something that she has to learn, whereas boys have to learn how to be competitive and how to be extremely fierce when it comes to earn money. So you need to understand all these things. Therefore, I hope you are now understand what is the difference between sex and gender. Therefore, now getting back to the radical feminism, when whereas there were people like Simone de Beauvoir who were talking about how gender as a category is constructed. There were at the same time other people like Shulamit Firestone. Now, Shulamit Firestone's book, The Dialect of Sex, in 1970, came up with a different kind of a very extremely and outrageous kind of an argument where she said that mothering or becoming mother or this whole process of reproduction was something which was blocking, which was an obstacle for the freedom of a woman. You know, she found that when a woman becomes a mother, or when she actually starts, nurturing a baby, that is the time that actually becomes a blockage in her growth. That's why she said that, this process, the natural process of reproduction, should be altogether waved off by all women, and instead of that, the artificial process of reproduction should come into being. And she advocated the need of test tube babies. So obviously, as I told you, this was extremely outrageous, and there were a variety of other feminists who rejected this idea, and they said that Firestone's idea was completely unnatural, and mothering should not be seen as an obstacle for a woman; rather, it should be seen as something which is very life-affirming and very positive activity. And this is something that should be seen as a blessing, as a gift for women by nature, and not as a blockage for her growth. So, as Firestone was advocating against the natural process of um, reproduction, there were people like Mary O'Brien, whose books, The Politics of Reproduction in 1981, came up, which very strongly encountered the idea of Firestone. And she said that women are actually blessed to have a power of reproduction, right? And along with that came up Kate Millett. Kate Millett, but yet another feminist who talked about how, if you read literature, it is basically suffused with very sexual meanings. Okay, now what does she actually mean? The literature is suffused with sexual meanings. She only means that if you read literature, there are construction of images. Or the construction of imagery where you find women being associated with certain kinds of qualities like kindness, compassion, love, caretaking, and sympathetic, whereas men were associated with qualities like authority, like fierceness, like ferociousness, like competitiveness. These were the qualities with which the men were associated with. I'll just give you one example to clear my point over here. If you go through the Roman literature, Roman classical literature, there are a variety of gods over there. I'm just giving you the example of two gods. There is one god, actually goddess, not god, and this goddess is Venus, and there's another god who is Mars. Right now, both of these are actually the planets of our solar system. So Venus is referred to as a goddess because Venus is the goddess of love, whereas Mars, because the physical appearance of the Mars is that of redishness. Okay, if you know something about this uh, scientific way this particular planet looks like, it's very much reddish in its appearance, Mars. So this reddishness is actually seen as something which is fierce, something which is dangerous, something which is again related to war. And that is why Mars is the god of war, which is masculine, but Venus is a goddess of love, which is feminized. So why love is feminized and war is masculinized, you need to understand it. War is masculinized because war deals with killings, blood, destruction, which is associated with men. But love is feminized because it deals with life giving, nurturing, and a lovely feeling. Right? That is why it is feminized. This is how, this is just one example I've given you from Roman classical literature, but whole lot of literature is suffused with these kind of sexual meanings. And she said, but how literature, which is the reflection of life, has imbibed the common human ideology also. Okay, so I'll just very quickly recap about what liberal, Marxist, and radical feminisms were about, whereas liberal and socialist or the Marxist feminism were about the objective structures of society like politics, legalities, and economic production. Radical feminists actually moved way beyond it, and they said that they did not talk about equality first of all, because they said when we talk about equality like that of liberal and Marxist feminism, what happens is that there have been certain standards that have been set by men, as they are the one who are the rulers, they are the one who occupy the primary position in society, and what women essentially are trying to do is that they're trying to come up to that particular standard, and they want to come up to that, touch that standard to get equality by men. So subconsciously they are adhering to the of rules of being which are actually being set by men. So this is not really a very good idea of attaining equality. Whereas radical feminists thought that you need to emphasize on the difference. We need to understand that there is a difference, sexual differences between a man and a woman, and these differences have certain meanings because they've got certain natural roles which are differently assigned for men and women. They should be respected and should not actually be used to impose should not be used to impose inferiority upon women. That is what they were saying. Equality was not about coming up to the standards which are set by men, but it was about bridging up the gap and to understand that the difference between men and women should be respected, and there are differences, so they accepted the differences, and they said that they should be actually respected and should be seen in a very positive way, right? So this is how liberal Marxist and radical feminism has gone. Then comes, after a few decades, comes up psychoanalytical feminism. Now, what is psychoanalytical feminism? Name itself tells you that it is about the psyche of human mind. Hmm? The psyche of human being, which means that your psyche are developed in a certain way. When we talk about middle 20th century or early 20th century, there was a very important uh, psychologist who was working and who was worldwide famous, was Sigmund Freud. Now, I'm not actually getting into who Sigmund Freud was. You can run a very basic Google search on it, but he was one of the most celebrated psychologist at that time, and he had also come up with the same idea that women and men are unequal, or they can never be on the same platform because of the psyche that women have. And he said that women and and men have naturally different psychological aspects ingrained in them. Now, this was again a very conventional kind of mindset that a very intelligent psychologist like Sigmund Freud could also have, and though he was very badly actually opposed by feminists at that time, who said that these psyches are basically constructed. As Simone de Beauvoir has said, that one is never born as a woman but becomes a woman, and therefore there were feminists who were coming up and then says that no, actually these psyches are developed, they are put inside women as a different set of upbringing patterns, as I have already discussed with you. Therefore, psychoanalytical criticism also deals with how the psychology of women are constructed, and it had got nothing to do with the naturality or with the biological aspect of it. Now, and along with the same time, there were also the feminisms which were coming up from the women of color. Now, women of color simply means that Asians and African women, uh, we are called as people of color. You know why? Because seen from the Western point of view, they consider themselves superior over us because they've had a fairer race than us. Their skin color is fairer than us, so they felt that they are more superior to us. That's why they refer to us as women or men of color. So we are colorful to them because we do not coincide with their picture or their idea of what a human face should be like, or what a beautiful human face should be like. But important thing over here is that there were Asians, like there were Asian Americans or there were African American women who said that this whole idea of feminism that was getting built up, actually was built up from a perspective of a Western white middle class woman. Okay, please pay attention to the categories that I'm giving. Western white middle class women. All the women of all across all the cultures might have different set of problems, and therefore The feminist arguments that have been given up by these kind of feminism which we have just now seen were not applicable to them, right? So they said that, an Asian American women might have different concerns. African American women might have a different concern. A lesbian, a transgender, a bisexual women, they might have their different aspects or different concerns. Therefore, the result or the conclusion of all this session, of this particular discussion, is that there can never be one or the feminist theory. There have to be theories, because there are whole lot of societies, whole lot of communities wherein women have different kinds of concern. The only commonality is that women across all these cultures have occupied a secondary position. And they have been seen as sexual objects, which is something which has led towards, movement towards this feminist theories. So this is the general discussion that I wanted to have with you about feminist theory. If there are any problems, you can approach me, but there is one thing that I would like to tell you about it, is that you must understand that these feminist theories are important for you to understand, because when you read them, you understand that how women have actually looked at themselves, how they have at one point thought that political equality was important, economic equality was important, or equality regarding the reproduction was important, about how literature and history has been biased towards women, about how gender has become such a constructed society, constructed concept, and also how culture, language, literature are biased towards the subordinate sex, or about the position of women. You must understand all these things, because you need to tackle life, and whenever you're going to, grow up and going to get into the public arena, you will inevitably face this particular kind of discrimination, I must say. We are in a very advanced society, but still, seen from a gender equality point of view, we are not really living in a very healthy world. Please understand what is your position and negotiate with the world on this, on your own terms. This is important. But along with that side, also it is important for you to understand it, from the point of view of understanding your text. The title of the poem is Aunt Jennifer's Tiger, because Aunt Jennifer's Tiger talks about the burdens of institution of marriage that Aunt Jennifer has been carrying over her, and how is it that these burdens have actually crushed her personality totally, and how she has just been reduced to a very ineffective, emaciated being, right? So we shall discuss that very soon, and you know I just hope that you have been able to make some sense of this video. If there is any difficulty, please approach me. I'll definitely be more than happy to answer your question, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video and you've learned something out of it. Thank you so much. Have a very wonderful day ahead.